Since 1921, the Coterie of Social Workers, Trinidad and Tobago Incorporated, a women's organization started by Audrey Lane Jeffers, Shakonia Medal Gold, and Order of the British Empire, has provided many social services. Best known are the school feeding programs, day nurseries, women hostels, and the introduction of Mother's Day and Universal Children's Day. This year, the Coterie has continued to initiate an annual Women Awareness webinar. The fourth webinar builds consciousness on aging. Aging Empowerment Series, navigating the journey to vitality, purpose, and well-being. These webinars will take place on Zoom every Wednesday, 6 to 8 p.m. from the 12th of June to the 10th of July 2024. Come and prepare yourself for this normal process that we will all experience. Explore the global aging agenda and our national responses, perceptions of the elderly and resulting risk factors, abuse of the elderly, health, finances, legal issues, social isolation experiences of persons as they get older, aging, the climate change, and the information era, caregiving and aging. Are you prepared? Empower yourself for the stage of life with vitality, purpose, and well-being.
Today's webinar is focused on elderly and the new normal. According to the Central Statistical Office, data from 2011, the elderly population in Trinidad and Tobago stands at 13% of persons, and it says that it is above 60 years. With the data indicating the old age dependency ratio for the Caribbean increased from 10 in 2000 to 10 in 2020 and is expected to increase by 20 by 2030 and 28 by 2045. This suggests the importance of having these webinars, as it may inform our decisions, as all of us have different fields in social work, from policy, ageism, social welfare, the hospital, the different organizations or persons participating in today's webinars. The information derived from today's session can assist us with making informed decisions, but considering that the elderly is the new normal, given our demographics that we are now an aging population. Today, we have Mr. Michael James presenting on aging and the information age. Mr. Michael James is a Librarian 1 in the Public Libraries Division at NALIS. With a background in marketing and graphic design, he stays abreast of technology and the digital world, blending these skills to enhance library services. His work in public and prison libraries fueled his passion for merging digital innovation with literacy, leading him to pursue a Master's of Library and Information Studies at the University of the West Indies, Mona campus. Michael is committed to making libraries dynamic spaces for learning and engagement. I would like to welcome Mr. Michael James at this time.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Firstly, I'd like to thank the Coterie of Social Workers of Trinidad and Tobago for allowing me this opportunity to come and discuss the elderly and information age with you all. So I am Michael James, Librarian 1 at the Public Libraries Division, NALIS, and I'm going to share my screen Everyone is seeing the screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. So today I'll be presenting on the benefits of digital literacy for seniors. Digital literacy plays a crucial role in enhancing the quality of life for seniors. As older adults continue to navigate the challenges of daily living, it becomes essential to develop and maintain digital skills that enable them to stay connected, informed, and independent. What is digital literacy? Digital literacy is the ability to use information and communication technologies and the internet to reach information, evaluate it, and assemble knowledge in multiple forms. But why is digital literacy important? By developing digital literacy skills, seniors can take advantage of tools to manage their finances, shop online, and communicate with people around them around the world via email and social media. Some benefits of digital literacy are overcoming isolation, access to information and services, enhancing cognitive function, independence and convenience, safety and security, and personal fulfillment. The first benefit, overcoming isolation. Digital inclusion, defined as equal access and ability to use digital tools and resources, has become more crucial than ever, especially for seniors. Many elderly people experience isolation. These seniors can leverage social media, video calling, and other technologies to connect with loved ones and reduce these feelings of loneliness, which can be detrimental to their health. So basically, seniors don't want to feel left out. We know everything is moving forward. Everything now is a video call, a WhatsApp call, a FaceTime call, even Facebook video calls, and they would want to feel included. Like, how could I also be in this? So if I want to communicate with my grandchildren and everything they do is either FaceTime or WhatsApp video call, we would want to know how to use it as well. So overcoming isolation, the social connectivity, video calls with family and friends, social media platforms in the form of Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, and now young people, everything is TikTok. So we could be sending our grandparents TikTok videos, be like, hey granny, look at this is funny, or granny, look at this is how I learned to cook this recipe on TikTok. And as well, community engagement. What I have seen now, most communities have either a Facebook group or a WhatsApp group. So they would want to know what's going on in your environment, and without having the seniors in the group, they would not know. So being able to join on Facebook and WhatsApp, they'll feel included. Access to information and services. Government and financial services. As more services are being carried online, for example, bill payments or online banking, senior citizens need to learn how to comfortably and confidently access these services from the comfort of their home. So as I said, a lot of services are being brought online. You can now pay your taxes online, sign up for your license online. I know they have to go online to download the medical form for the driver's license once you're over 60. And you could also pay your utilities online. So a lot of government services are being brought online, and being digital literate, they'll be able to access this comfortably but also confidently. Right. Enhancing cognitive functions. Mental stimulation. With digital literacy skills, senior citizens can enhance their cognitive functions by using brain training apps and games. So now you no longer have to be in the papers looking for Sudoku or crosswords and word search in the papers. Once you're digitally literate, they could download these apps online and play these games. Like my mother-in-law has so many games, which is Sudoku, crossword, and even the trivia ones that just keep your mind busy. When they would know how to download themselves, no more having to run and ask a grandchild to download it or ask a neighbor to download it for you. They would be able to confidently just be like, let me go download, let's say, a crossword, and I have it on my phone or tab or even on the desktop. Lifelong learning. They can also partake in online courses or look at educational videos online. I know a lot of senior citizens who don't just want to sit at home doing nothing. So they would ask how to find, let me say, a short course online, or how to find a video on YouTube teaching you how to do a specific skill, learn something. They Once they could confidently do this, they would not have to worry about bothering anyone. And once they're using this online platform, they could keep their mind young, always enhancing their cognitive functions, lifelong learning, online thing. I was in school when I did my master's. I had some senior citizens in my class. This way they could be comfortable in the environment, the digital environment, and sit down and do the class from their home or office. Independence and convenience. Daily tasks. As the older population continues to grow and rely more on technology for various daily tasks, there is a need to empower them with digital skills. A lot of daily tasks are being online. You can now order your groceries online and have it delivered to you. Order food, you no longer need to leave your house to go and get food. You could food drop it. There are like at least 4 apps I could think of where you could just order food and they'll bring it straight to you. And I'm even speaking for the senior citizens. Me at my age, I don't necessarily want to leave the house for food if they're bringing it to me. So I know it's a good to have. So once you have the skills to use, let's say, a smartphone, a tab, even go on the computer, sign up for it online, you could use it for ordering food, ordering groceries. There's door to door where I could go on, say exactly what I want and pay, and they'll deliver it straight to me. So having independence and convenience is a big aspect of being digitally literate. Safety and security. Cybersecurity awareness. Cybersecurity is now a worldwide issue affecting all age groups, meaning that everyone needs to be aware of it and adopt safer practices when interacting on the web. Since technology is perhaps less intuitive for seniors, they unfortunately often represent an easier target for cyber criminals. Now, safety and security is so important on the daily. I'm asked by senior citizens how safe is, let's say, online banking, how safe it is to just even log in and put my, let's say, credit card or debit card information on my device, because they automatically assume that once they put that information on their device, anybody could access it and take advantage of it. Now, cybersecurity doesn't necessarily only need online as in the internet, because like as recently with text messages, the TT Post scam that was going around, where they claim as TT Post saying your package is available, click this link. And once you click the link from the text message, they will automatically start to pull your information. So being aware of what to do online is very crucial to being digitally literate. Some challenges and solutions. First challenge, having access to internet and Wi-Fi. Digital literacy inevitably involves the need for an internet connection. Unfortunately, for a variety of reasons, access to good Wi-Fi can sometimes be a challenge. High monthly costs, restricted accessibility in some regions, limited services in certain residences or apartments, insufficient information about how to use the internet, etc. So this is a big challenge, especially when we are in the Caribbean, so the weather affects our internet a lot. This weekend, internet was dropping like crazy with the bad weather system that was passing. So one solution is having improved internet access in public areas. So there's TT Wi-Fi, there's TT Wi-Fi in the libraries, there's TT Wi-Fi, I believe in City Gate, most malls have a Wi-Fi connection. If you have a Flow account, Flow has a public Wi-Fi that you find in certain spots that will pop up, and once you log in with your Flow information, you have access to Wi-Fi outside of your home. So internet access in public areas, initiatives enabling greater connectivity, social housing, and much more. So I will class the Flow initiative as the greater connectivity, where you could log in with you have Flow internet home, just log in, and you have access to internet. Another challenge, new technologies is a challenge, a learning curve. With the world evolving so rapidly, it is perfectly normal for the elderly population to be somewhat unfamiliar with technology. seniors are now faced with a major adaptation challenge. Technology changes every year. Smartphones, the iPhone changes. There's a new iPhone every year. So if it's difficult for, let's say, a younger person to keep up with these changes, just imagine how difficult it is for older persons to say, well, I don't even have an iPhone, but all I keep talking about the phone is changing. Samsung phones come out every year, a new phone is coming out with more advanced features. There's AI in most of the devices, and if you probably tell a senior citizen who doesn't know anything about technology, AI, they would not know what I mean artificial intelligence, and that it helps. So it might be scary to learn. And the solution to this learning curve is just having proper resources and tools. It is amazing to observe how quickly seniors can familiarize themselves with the new digital culture in society. And this sentence stands out so much because I've seen it happen when I teach digital computer classes in the library. At first, they'll be like, sir, I don't even want to touch the mouse, I'm scared. And by the end of it, they're showing their friends how to use the computer. They're telling their friends, come and they want to set up their email addresses. So once they just observe and keep practicing, they will get over that learning curve. And lastly, finding easily accessible training or workshops. To avoid the digital divide threatening to separate the elderly from the younger population, it is vital to offer workshops and training that are both relevant and accessible. So, solutions, free training activities to help seniors learn about digital technology, where you have community centers offering, per se, computer classes or how to use your devices. And this will just take me into my next slide. Digital literacy services offered by the library, by Malice. So we offer computer classes, bring your own device sessions, internet and research assistance, social media training, and assistance in accessing government services. So in these computer classes, the senior citizens could not only learn how to use the computer, but they learn how to use the internet, how to access YouTube, how to set up an email. Sometimes they will get the social media training in that classroom time, Facebook access, and they always enjoy the computer classes and they always want more. We also do introduction to Microsoft Office with Microsoft Word and PowerPoint. And we have digital literacy classes that include bring your own device, so they can bring their smartphones, their tablets, even their laptops, and we will teach them on how to use it efficiently and correctly. And internet and research assistance, if they come in looking for a topic on something or on somebody, we will always sit down and help research it and make sure they leave with the information or as close to the information as possible. And I spoke about the social media training. We also teach them how to use WhatsApp, and soon to be teaching Instagram. And assistance in accessing government services. A lot of senior citizens come in and ask how to, let's say, access, I want to get a blue paper or I want to get my passport, and we will sit down with them and show them how to do it. Just this month I had to help 3 persons get the fit for the medical form for the license. So that's how I know now a lot of these services are online. In conclusion, benefits of digital literacy for seniors include social connectivity, access to information, cognitive benefits, independence and safety. By being digitally literate, seniors don't have to fear of being left behind in an ever progressing world. And that brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you again for allowing me to share this information with you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Michael James, on sharing such an insightful and impactful information on aging and the information age. At this time, we would only take 3 questions, and any other question can be asked at the ending of the webinar. You can utilize the reaction button or the chat button at the end of your screen. Also, if you have any comments to make, we would also welcome some here at this time. Any questions or comments directed to Mr. Michael James?
Yes, good afternoon. I was wondering, my name is Donna Wilson, if there are specific library days when seniors can come to get the training or further information on any of the services he mentioned just now.
Hi, good night, Miss Wilson. So it depends on which library is closest to you. You can always call that library and ask what services they have offered. So I know if you're in the West, we have computer classes at the Vega Mountain Library, and that would be senior citizens at every Tuesdays and Thursdays from 10:30 to 11:30. So it really depends on which library is closest to you.
That would be the main library, Mandis on Abercrombie Street.
So you could always call the adult library. I will put the number in the chat and just inquire when they answer when or what time they would have computer classes. And I know they had digital literacy classes as well.
Thank you so much. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Well,
Miss Susan Edwards said, thank you for the information. Anyone else would like to ask a question or make a comment?
Yes, I am Petra Gomez, and I would like to know if at NALIS they train you how to do online banking.
Online banking. This is not a session, a workshop that we are currently planning because we don't want to have your personal information. We are trying to get representatives from the institutions to come and train you on how to access the online banking in the safest way possible.
Okay.
And this is the last question that we would take. It was sent by Miss Diane Grant in the chat. Are there any mobile services offered to seniors in the community to provide for those who have no one to take them to the library for training? I am thinking about the accessibility and transport. Thank you.
Mobile services, not at this moment. I believe I see my supervisors in the session, Ms. Thomas, Mr. Lee Thomas, who could possibly help with that answer as well. But so Hyacinth said Eldamo services could be used.
Okay, so would Miss Thomas be answering the question, or I saw she said hello in the chat. All right, so we have some options available.
Hello, sorry. Yeah. Hello.
Good afternoon. Floor is open.
Oh, good afternoon. Yes. So at present, we do not have mobile services available, but I saw that Mr. James also posted the contact information for the adult library, and we do get back to you as quickly as we can. So once we know that seniors do have a need and they have a request, what we do is we try to work with them. And we try to get them at least to the closest location and closest library to where they live. Sometimes it means probably getting in contact with a family member or something like that who will be able to provide that support, and we walk them through it and we work with them as well. But at present, we do not have any mobile services. I am so very sorry, but we do have a range of online services, which Mr. James, I know, would have mentioned. Right now, our services are evolving a bit, and of course, with suggestions, we will see how best we can, try to make the transition smoother for persons who have challenges. I hope that helps.
Yes, it does. Thank you very much, Ms. Thomas. Also in the chat, we have Dr. Hyacinth Blake sharing some additional information that persons can access. You're welcome, Ms. Diane Grant. Now, this carries us into our another topic, which is around aging and caregiving. Today, we have Dr. Annette Cambridge, social scientist and development worker. Dr. Cambridge is a former chairperson and treasurer of the Coterie of Social Workers, Port of Spain branch, a board member and trustee. She has written on Audrey Jeffers and the Coterie, and there is a lecture on Audrey Jeffers that was uploaded by the Institute of Gender and Development at the University of the West Indies on YouTube. She was a senior lecturer and coordinator of the Social Policy Program at the University of the West Indies, where she pioneered courses in social development policy and planning, social policy, social gerontology, sociology of families, and established a disability studies unit. Dr. Cambridge has published in the areas of child welfare, social policy, social work, disability studies, poverty, and living conditions in urban areas. In 1983, Dr. Cambridge established a Peace Center, which was designed a peace messenger by the United Nations. We also have Dr. Shalene Gomes, anthropologist at the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine campus. Dr. Gomes teaches social anthropology and the sociology of culture in the Faculty of Social Sciences at the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine campus. Her monograph, Cosmopolitanism from the Global South, 2021, explores Caribbean cosmopolitan sensibilities through South migration between the Caribbean and Ethiopia. Dr. Gomes' current interdisciplinary research examines the coverage of migration and care for aging populations in Trinidad and Tobago. She is present at 2023 to present visiting scholar in residence at the University of Cape Town Department of Anthropology and a member of the International Globalization, Accessibility, Innovation and Care Research Network. We also have presenting with us Dr. Hyacinth Blake, PhD in Sociology, attained from the University of Sheffield, United Kingdom. Dr. Blake attained a PhD in Sociology in 2020 from the University of Sheffield, United Kingdom, on the research topic, Family Care for Frail Older Persons, Social Policy Implications for Trinidad and Tobago. Prior to this, she successfully completed her Master's in Sociology in 2003 at the University of the West Indies, Mona, Jamaica, where her thesis focused on humanization of community homes for older persons in Trinidad. Dr. Blake is a results-focused professional with 9 years service as a senior adjunct lecturer and over 16 years experience in social planning, research, and policy development in the public sector. Dr. Blake's experience includes serving as the Director for the Division of Aging and the Director for Social Investigations Division within the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services, as well as representing Trinidad and Tobago as part of the in-person delegation to high-level international social development fora in Paraguay, Utah, Jordan, Belgium, and New York. At this time, I would like to invite Dr. Cambridge.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I would like to get straight into it. All protocols observed. And today I have the pleasure of sort of trying to expand your minds a little bit as we talk about caregiving. Now, this is a series on aging empowerment, and we are really trying to, all of these different sessions, navigate the journey as to how we can get elderly persons to live with vitality, purpose, and well-being. Now, my theme is aging and caregiving, but I'm going to be talking about the elderly as caregivers. My colleagues are going to be talking about the elderly as persons receiving care. But I want us to understand that elderly not only receive care, but they also can be caregivers. The plan of the presentation is the elderly as caregivers, the importance and impact of caring. We're going to look at care of self, care of family, care of community, and most importantly, how do we know when the elderly person needs assisted care? So I start with care of self. Now, in order to adequately care for others, we must first be well enough to look after ourselves. The old cliche, put on your mask first before you put on a mask on anyone else. You know, you hear that in the airplane. When the airplane is going through turbulence, they always tell you, you put on your mask first and then put on the mask for the child or the person you're looking after. And this applies to the elderly as caregivers. We need to look after ourselves, and note that I've included myself within the category of the elderly. So this whole topic is quite important to me. So that we have to recognize that before we can help anybody, we need to be able to help ourselves. So therefore, self-care is important, and as it is important at all stages of life, but it is essential in order to live life with vitality, purpose, and well-being in the later stages of life. Self-care facilitates resilience, that ability to bounce back after the different knocks that we get. As one passes 60 years, it becomes even more important. Now, what are the areas for self-care? I've identified 5 here. You may hear as the presentation goes on with the other panelists about other areas for self-care and other areas how to deal with self-care. But the areas I identified is making sure you have your material needs met, caring for your physical body, caring for your mental health, social relationships, and your spiritual life. Now, material self-care. It is this which determines to a very large extent our overall quality of life. We need shelter. We need food. We need clothing, education, entertainment. All of these things require finance, and you have to understand that even if the elderly person cannot provide, but they are enjoying these things, somebody is paying for it. It may be the government, it may be another relative, but there is none of these goods and services we can get free in this world. Somebody has to pay. And very often, if it's the elderly person is not in a position to provide these goods and services for themselves, the government, NGO, family, somebody, steps up to the plate. So that one of the things we have to recognize is in order to do good self-care, we need to have an adequate income, which requires planning from before we become elderly, making sure we have our own house, make sure we have an adequate income, like maybe doing a job which gives us a pension, making sure we get our NIS, that the NIS is paid for. We need an income in order to look after ourselves. When we don't have adequate resources, material resources, the result is often destitution. You sometimes would see an elderly person on the street begging, or dependence on others. But generally, it means an inability to maintain basic living standards. What about the care of one's physical body? Another cliche containing much truth is your health is your wealth. As an elderly person, for an elderly person, moderation, or when it applies, less or none, is the key to healthy living. We need less sugar, less fat, less red meat, less or no alcohol, less or no cigarettes, or narcotics like the weed, the cocaine, whatever we've been using as young people. This has to be minimalized or eliminated. And what I have observed is very often persons who sort of overdosed on a lot of these things and never got control of their intake, they don't really live very long, They don't live to be their 70s, 80s very often. Many of them start to go at about 60. Especially cigarette smokers. Cigarette smokers tend to go younger than the rest of the population. Regular exercise of all parts of the body are required for vitality in later years. So that not only are we to be taking our regular walks, but we need, like drivers, make sure you exercise your feet. Do the windshield wiper exercise to make sure that as you're changing your gears, your feet don't clam up. Other parts of the body that we often don't think of exercising are eyes. There are different eye exercises which can be quite helpful, in addition to the regular exercises of swimming, jogging, walking, and of course playing. Those of whom who are able to do so, a little game, a little tennis, a little football. But we have to do it all in moderation, because we always have to be careful about falling. We need to prevent chronic and lifestyle diseases, and when they arrive, manage their further development with time. Very often before one gets diabetes, the doctor will warn you and say, you're pre-diabetic, You're pre-diabetic. Listen and start to manage one's diet and exercise. Because the development of these will mean that your physical body, when it gets to the worst case scenario, your physical body is no longer able to function at optimum. And in cases where there are some illnesses which cannot be prevented because we don't know these reasons why we get different diseases, whether it's Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, etc., it's important to work with doctors to best manage the illness or disease. So care of one's physical body is essential. Mental self-care and well-being. This is something that we used to ignore long ago. But I've noticed that recently mental health has become an important topic in today's world. So how can we do mental self-care? First of all, mindfulness. Learning to be sensitive and aware of one's feelings in the moment and without judging ourselves. We need to be very compassionate to ourselves. Recognizing the internal dialogues that take place in our mind, especially the negative messages, the way we put ourselves down. Yeah, I jeopardize. No. That is a negative message coming from I don't know what part of the mind. I'm not a psychologist, nor am I a mental health expert, but we do not encourage those sorts of dialogues in ourselves. We have to keep that mind sharp and keep stimulated. Playing a musical instrument, working. Not at the sort of speed that we did before we may have retired or when we were younger, because very often we don't have the same type of energy. But we could keep ourselves engaged in activities, and that keeps the mental mind, it keeps the mind sharp with certain amount of intellectual stimulation. Some people do crossword puzzles, and getting together with friends and having a conversation and having a little tea party, very helpful. Conversing, sitting down to dinner, talking, reacting, very important. We have to keep our minds working. Developing self-control, so that tendency to, whether it is to smoke some marijuana, to go to the extreme in any area, to smoke cigarettes. We have to be able to control, to overeat, to eat those sweet things. We have to start definitely developing self-control, which is a bit of a mind issue. Recognizing those moods and emotions, which is close to being mindful. However, sadness, anger, resentment, and we need to develop positive coping strategies. For example, if we're feeling sad, it may help just to go for a walk. That's a positive one. It doesn't help to go and eat a whole tub of ice cream. You feel better afterwards, but that's not necessarily a positive coping mechanism. Anger. There are some people who know how to push our buttons. When we realize our buttons are being pushed, there are people who will wait 10 seconds, count to 10 before responding. Because sometimes you respond with violence. And therefore you develop coping mechanisms, healthy coping mechanisms to deal with the different emotions. You also have to look at issues of resentment. Resentment and the building up sort of disregard for persons who really have been hurtful. And this is where you learn to forgive. Develop the art of forgiveness. And always, when you recognize that things are more than you can handle, please consult a mental health professional. Social self-care. This is something we often don't talk about. But we are social beings, like others of our mamas, like many other mamas, which are quite social. And we need to recognize that socialization and close human connections are important for social well-being. Relationship building with others is an important skill for the elderly, especially for those who are living alone. With family members, one should be accessible. When they're trying to call you, don't ignore them. Answer the phone. When you find yourself being caught, busy doing something, it doesn't hurt. Your husband or your wife comes in, spend that minute. They just want to find out something. Be accessible. Be responsive. Somebody approaches you, respond. And always be emotionally engaged, especially with close friends and family. Spiritual self-care. Now, this spiritual wellness and well-being differs for everyone. However, it's characterized by these three factors. Bottom line, we have to recognize there is a higher power. Feeling interconnected with humanity. I understand there is a cord that links us all up together, which some people have said they can see, and some others have said they can feel it. And we have to recognize that interdependence of humanity. We also have to realize that we are interlinked with all creation. We all know of the links with our pets and different animals, but we're also linked to the plant kingdom and, of course, the universe, which continues to expand and become very much more than we are aware of. And we're still learning so much about the universe. But we have to come to terms with the vastness of our world. We need to have meaning and purpose in life, being able to answer the question, who am I? Why am I here? And then ways of linking with one's spirituality. How do we become more spiritual? And many people use breath work, prayer, service to community, time in nature. And lack of spiritual self-care can result in a feeling of alienation, lack of purpose for living, and depression. So that we need to be involved in caregiving for the family. Who in the family? Next slide. Grandchildren. And sometimes we find ourselves looking after having brought up our children. These children have children, but they're not looking after them for different reasons. They may have died, they may have developed AIDS, they may be drug users. Grandchildren, we find ourselves having to become caregivers for them. Our own parents who are older, say we are in our 60s, our parents have reached their 90s. Sometimes we're caring for both parents and children at the same time, and are referred to as the sandwich generation. Many people find themselves having to care for siblings, brothers, sisters, husbands, wives, and the extended family. Now, we find that caring for all of these groups prevents institutionalization of the demographic cohort so that grandchildren can be saved from the children's homes if their grandparents take up the responsibility for them. Siblings could end up, as they get older, in jail, not in jail, but end up in a care home. If somebody in the family doesn't take care of them, or they can often end up dying early because they're not taking good enough care of themselves, and therefore they're not taking their medication, etc. And of course, extended family. Caregiving in the community. Successful communities are dependent on shared values, healthy interactions, and mutual support. Community groups such as religious or non-governmental organizations and clubs help carry on these functions. By being part of these groups, the elderly contribute to carrying out these goals and thus contribute to community cohesion. The elderly have a responsibility to mentor, pass on their knowledge and skills to the next generation. The elderly should discreetly support to the best of their ability needy households and families in their neighborhood. The advantages of caregiving. Caregiving to self, family, and community allows one to remain physically fit, have vitality, purpose, and well-being. Today, many more persons are living to 100 years, given better health care and living standards. Should our lives not be cut short by stupid persons who cause wars, whether in the family, community, nation, or internationally, we all stand a chance to live to 100 years. And I hope all of us have that as a goal. Next. Now, not everybody is going to be blessed to reach 100 with vitality, purpose, and well-being. Some persons around 84, 85 need assisted care. This need can present as early as 60 years or before. So what are the signs that an elderly person needs care? Dementia, and in particular Alzheimer's, neglecting personal hygiene, taking medications and household maintenance, inability to perform daily tasks of living, such as preparing meals, personal grooming, increased social isolation, physical frailty. So these are the cues that the person needs help. However, we want to live with vitality, purpose, and well-being. And until there is clear evidence that we need support for the normal activities of daily living, we, the elderly, want to live with vitality, purpose, and well-being. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cambridge, for such an insightful and impactful presentation. Now, we would like to welcome Dr. Shalene Gomes. We want to share a special thank you to Dr. Shalene Gomes, who is in South Africa at this time, very up with us very early in the morning. So we thank you for accepting to present today, and we welcome you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Ms. Joseph, Mrs. Howard. It's really an honor and a privilege to be here today. And thanks so much to the Coterie of Social Workers, Trinidad and Tobago, for allowing me to participate in this webinar to share a bit about the research that I am doing in Trinidad and Tobago, more so with a focus on Trinidad, into caregiving, migration, and the gender division of labor. So I'm going to try sharing my screen with the slideshow, and I hope everybody is able to see it. Yes, okay, good, thank you. So this is a micro level project that I lead, and you'll see the team members here, Antonia and Maria. Maria Gomes also presented here at one of the previous webinars. And what we basically do is focus on two things. We focus on one, the prevalence of women as both paid and unpaid care workers. And secondly, we look at the connections between migration and care, in particular through the experiences of women who have returned from various countries like the US, Canada, and the UK, typical migration destinations, but also in the Caribbean, returning from Jamaica to Trinidad and Tobago, their country of birth. And so you'll see some of these connections here in this diagram, particularly that between doing paid care work and unpaid care work. And I'd like to start off with this point because care work is important everywhere. With rising rates of aging, more people, I see Petra has her hand up. But do you mind if we, yes, would you like to go?
Small that I cannot see it. So I'm wondering if you could make it bigger.
I can try.
Yes.
Oh, this is too big. I could try to expand the text here.
All right, thanks.
I don't think it will work too much. That's her. Let me just give it one last try. No, but I will go through this. I will go through the diagram because the key point here is that it is both paid and unpaid care work that typically women both in the Caribbean, in Trinidad and Tobago, and around the world are doing. And it is also women who are doing this, and of course every migrant who are doing this across borders, across countries, so they're doing this transnationally, while they themselves are doing work, waged work or paid work in other sectors. And so to go back to the point about aging populations and the question of care work, with rising rates of aging, more people are engaging in both waged and unwaged, paid and unpaid care work. But it is women who globally tend to do 3 times more unwaged care work than men. And so both waged and unwaged care work is typically undertaken by women across culture, across economic and social class, and across geography. So it is a common trend that we find around the world, and we see it replicated as well in Trinidad and Tobago, in Latin America, and the Caribbean. This is work that is essential to the reproduction of life. But it is also work that remains undervalued, right? And this is kind of the contradictions of how valuable and essential this work is, but how little value we give it within our society, and also in terms of the payment for it. So it is taken for granted work, built into the behavioral expectations and social institutions for girls and women, mothers, grandmothers, wives, partners, daughters, sisters. And for example, Dr. Cambridge mentioned in her presentation about women or the older persons doing both the caregiving for themselves and for the younger generation. So that point about the sandwich generation is not something that's new, and it is something that is it remains, and it is becoming much more acute. So this embedded gender division of labor does not mean that men don't do care work. Of course they do, but they tend to be the exception to the norm. And so it is still mostly women around the world who do this unpaid and paid care work, as well as working for wages. And this is where you'll see here, this box at the top here. So it also talks about both doing working in other sectors, doing paid work, and doing the unpaid care work. And the box at the bottom, doing as well the similar, doing waged work, but as a care worker. But it is often low paid work, and it is always undervalued work. So what is very interesting is that despite the professionalization of women, meaning the entry of more women into the workforce, these patterns of caregiving and care work have not changed. They have not changed by and large around the world, and they have not changed in Latin America and the Caribbean or in Trinidad and Tobago. So in Latin America and the Caribbean, for example, in 1990, only 44% of women participated in the labor force. And in 2014, this ratio increased to 54%. And so these are the kinds of numbers of women in the workforce that we see typically in more developed economies and in bigger economies. But despite these significant changes with women entering the formal workforce, parity has not meant equality. So we might have more women in numbers in the workforce, but the value given to traditionally women's work like caregiving and care work still remains very low. And so there have not been corresponding changes to expectations and the valuing of care work. And we saw this very clearly with the devastating COVID-19 pandemic. And we see this in emergencies like, for instance, the hurricane and the storms that are currently happening now in the rainy season. It is typically women who will continue to do that kind of care work, that kind of less than visible or invisible labor. And so during the pandemic, we saw, for example, that in the United States, when forced to decide between caring for their families and paid work, some 3 million women left the paid workforce in 2020. And so this last box here, this one on the right, is showing precisely how important the labor of migrant women is to the destination countries. But their labor is also, our labor is also very important in home countries and countries of origin. So both the waged work and the unwaged caregiving, or in the case of migrant women who do waged or paid care work, both their paid work as caregivers and their unwaged work still caring for aging parents and relatives. And so there are considerable personal and professional opportunity costs to care work that is undervalued, which also arise because the state is withdrawing social protections. And we know in Trinidad and Tobago, for example, the public healthcare sector is strained, and it is sometimes of very poor quality, while the private healthcare is excessively costly with only perhaps slightly better health outcomes. So in countries like Trinidad and Tobago, the ability to pay for medical treatments and preventative health care determines life and death chances. And that's the kind of inequality that we also want to address. And so if privileged persons and families are strained, vulnerable groups are even more exposed given the multiple inequalities. And some of these, the previous presentations touched on. So the privatization of care, this kind of like a two-tier public sector, private sector healthcare, means that families and communities also take on more responsibility. It's not just that those who can afford to go to private healthcare can may have slightly better outcomes, but it's also then that families and communities take on more responsibility to do the care work for the aging population. And there is a preference for aging in place. And so very briefly, I won't go through this slide, but I just put it up here just to have this to be able to read. So in the Caribbean, rates of aging are higher than the global average, signaling also that the Caribbean can provide lessons about care policies and best practices. And so I've also co-authored a policy brief for the Think 20 G20 forum this year in Brazil, precisely looking at recommendations from the Caribbean. So, of course, the number of older persons is projected to grow very quickly in Latin America and the Caribbean. And then combined with that reliance on family and community care, also referred to as aging in place, this situation means that caregivers are typically women within families. So even when workers are hired to care for older persons, it is often women in the families and in the households who themselves are employed in other sectors who also do the elder caregiving. And my research, primarily in Trinidad, as I said, is with a small subsection of professional women categorized as highly skilled workers who choose to return to Trinidad and Tobago to provide this in-person care for aging parents and relatives. But if these families can afford to hire care workers for aging relatives, why don't they? Why do they choose to return? And in this project, we examined the convergence of migration and care within the gender division of labor, demographic changes, cultural expectations, as well as austerity measures. So these are some of the characteristics. We have a participant group of 10 women who voluntarily agreed to participate. And this is subject matter that for all of us in the research team is also something, of course, that's very personal, right? As research always is. And so we wanted to understand in a very systematic kind of way what their experiences were, and also to kind of reflect on our experiences as being abroad and returning, and that impetus to care and that feeling that we needed to be there in person to care for aging parents and relatives. And so relatedly, to connect this to migration, given well-established patterns of Caribbean migration, there are even fewer people able to support older adults and undertake caregiving. But in the case of families who can afford to hire care workers, as I've mentioned, why do they feel this need to return? And this was the main question that guided our project. So to give a very brief background into this, we're coming to the end of the project now that we started in 2019, and we held a roundtable discussion at the UB St. Augustine campus, and we also held a workshop on this topic. So we had 10 voluntary participants, all women. Interestingly, the men who attended were a bit more reluctant to participate with us. But all of these voluntary participants between the ages of 24 and 64 were interested in contributing because they wanted people to know what their experiences were, right, on a daily basis. And so we conducted in-person interviews that blended conversational and kinds of semi-structured techniques in qualitative research. And of course, as expected, during 2020 to 2022, during COVID-19 and the associated lockdowns, our interviews were put on hold. But we maintained contact by phone and messaging apps. Sadly, but not unexpectedly, some elderly relatives had passed on during that time. And so what we hope to do, and what we have done to a great degree, is bring to the forefront of this discussion of care, aging, and migration, the sometimes invisible and often undervalued work of informal caregivers. And so the project explores the reconfiguring of duties, burdens, and responsibilities in Trinidad and Tobago, offering a perspective on social reproduction and the family relations in which they are entangled. And our objective was to elicit, as I said, participants' detailed experiences of the everyday, but also of the emotional, the gendered, and the institutional labors that they undertook in returning to care for aging relatives. And one of the main things that we found is that caregiving appeared to be collective. The decision to voluntarily return appeared to be, of course, these were decisions that people took collectively, right? But they really thought very long and hard about this, because many, if not all women, deprioritized their careers. They took flexible jobs, they took pay cuts, they changed careers, right, to return. And so care may appear to be organized collectively among family and kin to ensure the comfort and safety of the aging relative. But a closer look shows that it is the women in the family who rearrange their lives to provide this in-person care. And so daughters continue to be valuable for their assistance in the care of elderly parents, even if the daughters themselves have migrated. And so the first point here is precisely that, right? Showing that they still undertake these caregiving responsibilities transnationally. And both Maria and I have had this experience of differing intensity. My parents are in very good health for their age, and so they don't need that kind of constant in-person care. But Maria's mother, for example, did at that time. And so when Flora, one of our participants, returned to Trinidad from the US to care for her mother, she agreed with her brothers that she would make the sacrifice to return. But it was also because in her family, she was the only daughter, the only woman, and seen as best suited to provide this in-person care for her mother. And because as a woman, her brothers perceived her as more caring and her waged work as less important to their waged work, then she returned. And so this point about silence emerged, and the idea that caregiving is collectively organized, of course, but probing a bit closer into the dynamics of family decision making, for example, also demonstrated and how women talked about their decision to return and talked about their caregiving experiences also showed a great deal of silence, if that makes sense. And so what was especially striking in our interviews was that women did not readily speak of the difficulties of caregiving for a relative. And they mentioned these difficulties, but women framed their unwaged work as guided by love, obligation, and the importance of reciprocating and returning the love that their parents had given them as children. And we found that the responsibility of care work is often willingly accepted because it is associated with a narrative of love and intertwined with cultural and gendered expectations. And I'm coming to the end shortly here. And as Janet, another one of our participants, remarked, caring for her aging parents is a labor of love. And so we're not saying that this care is not guided by love, of course not. But what we're arguing is that there are these additional costs to the decisions that are often neglected. And so caregivers themselves, informal caregivers, voluntary caregivers, don't often speak about this. And it means then that we continue to kind of have a silence around how important and how valuable and how critical and essential care work is to kind of social reproduction, right? And to continuing. And so to end then, such labors of love exact everyday physical and emotional tolls on informal caregivers. Some of these tolls were described by our participants, and I'm sure many people can relate to this: chronic shoulder pain, hypervigilance, a lack of sleep, constantly feeling tired. And so these labors of love also come with resentments. And so it is these kinds of complex dynamics that we think are really important to also kind of shed some light on. And not only the deep commitment or love as well, but the kinds of complexities around caregiving and informal caregiving, as well as the kinds of structured, gendered division of labor. So I would like to just end by kind of pointing to some of the conclusions, as well as some of the things that we will continue to examine. So the fact that this is a cross-cultural, cross-class kind of set of expectations to do the care work, as well as thinking about different patterns of caregiving in a multicultural society, like Trinidad and Tobago, for example. And then finally, I wanted to end just by showing a picture. This is one of our earlier workshops that we convened. And so we had informal caregivers, we had paid care workers, we had social workers, sociologists, anthropologists, so academics, people as well, just interested and doing this kind of informal care work. And so I will end here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gomes, for sharing your expertise with us. Your presentation was truly appreciated and insightful. Now we would like to welcome Dr. Hyacinth Blake.
Good night, everyone. All protocols observed. Thank you so much for the opportunity to make this presentation. And just for a second, I want to express my condolences to the families that would have lost relatives, carers in our neighboring islands of Grenada and so on. So thank you, God, for stilling the waters as Hurricane Beryl goes through the region. So let me share my screen and get into the presentation. My topic for tonight is willingness to provide care, elder care post-pandemic. So we have survived. Thank God we've survived a very difficult time from 2020 to 2022-ish. And we're still recovering. If you hear me, those who know me, I'm a bit husky. I'm battling a non-COVID cold that was very long in how it's impacted on me. And I am an elder carer. So I have not seen my mom in person for a couple of weeks now because I don't want to pass on this cold for her. And so I'm very grateful for what Dr. Cambridge shared earlier about the need for caregivers to care for themselves as well. Put on that mask, all right, so that we can be able to care for others effectively. So what am I going to discuss tonight? I want to show you some of the pre-pandemic information on elder care based on data collected between 2011 and 2014, but published online as part of my PhD thesis in 2020, and give a general overview of what post-pandemic care looks like internationally. Let's talk about how care has reloaded. Hot care, cold care, don't care. Where do we position ourselves given all the challenges that even Dr. Gomes would have highlighted along with Dr. Cambridge? Simple versus complicated care. I'll do a poll quickly in the room, so get ready to click on that little smiley icon and tell me where you fall. And let's talk about balanced, healthy care as part of the conclusion of this presentation. So for more details as to the information I'm going to share on Trinidad and Tobago, you can just go online, Google Family Care for Frail Older Persons, Social Policy Implications for Trinidad and Tobago. It's open source, free of charge. White Rose ETCs online. So what did pre-pandemic family care look like in Trinidad and Tobago? One of the components of the research that I did included an online survey, and some of the questions asked to the 201 respondents were, which option here, as you would see in this chart, will better describe your main desired change to caring? This is before the pandemic. And let me see if I could expand it a bit more. Many of them, about half, said they will continue to provide care if the situation remained the same. Now, a lot has changed since then. So I'm really interested to see more recent research in our territory, in our region on this. So Dr. Gomes, I'm eagerly awaiting the publication of that study that you're doing, and you and your colleagues, only 14% they said they will continue to provide care, but only if they have more support. And again, we heard from the presenters why having support is critical for care to continue, especially since caring is not a sprint, it's oftentimes a marathon. So you have to pace yourself and you have to make sure that you're not pulling a hamstring in the process. All right. Now, only a few wanted the care responsibilities to continue if they increase, if they intensified. And that, of course, is a interesting finding in terms of the fact that it usually does intensify, especially with us living longer. And as you see, a very small percentage consider placing the elder into an institution or long-term care facility, which is also consistent with the research that Dr. Gomes mentioned that her team is doing. So much so that we have migrant care chains not only leaving Trinidad and Tobago to provide care overseas as paid care, but returning. So we also have that particular phenomenon happening. Now, this point about willingness to institutionalize, what I found was that, again, about half of the participants, in this case 211 participants, they were not willing to put their elder into an institution under any circumstances. Again, it's consistent with the studies that we had. And we shouldn't take it for granted that this is obvious, because we are Trinis, those of us who are Trinis in the room, because in other territories, it's not necessarily like that. Across the globe, there are different approaches to whether people will want to institutionalize, and that is directly related to how people perceive or experience institutionalized care. And also the cultural values in terms of filial piety, whether they feel a duty to care, whether that is a core cultural value. All right. Now, as you see in this graph, 44% of the persons said they would only institutionalize the elder, put them into an assisted facility or a home, capital H, for older persons if they were severely dependent, need the oxygen tank, they don't have the skill set to cater to the higher range of dementia, that sort of thing. They may be willing to put their elder into some form of institution. And very few would put their elder in an institution if they're only slightly independent, which is understandable. Once they're able-bodied, they're not going to bother to pay that money or put their elder in another environment. Now, as I said, it changes with every context. I could speak about my great aunt in the UK, and she chose, when she became a widow, to go into an assisted living facility, even though she was living in a lovely apartment near to grandchildren, but when they went to work, and she was very outgoing. She loved to be part of a lime. She loved to socialize, and for her, it was so lonely and boring being at home that she put herself into an assisted living facility. And it was a really nice facility. I got to spend a weekend with her there. And it was where she felt alive and bubbly and where she could interact with people. Even locally, there was someone near to where I live just a couple months ago. And they chose, or there was a decision for them to return to Trinidad from the US. This is an elder over 80, because her only daughter passed away in the US after she has lived there over 40 years. And so the extended family made arrangements for her to come and stay in a private rental facility. Not an institution, but it's like her own apartment. Man, she protested. After a few days, she was banging on the door, burning the door. She was like, it was terrible. She did not want to be by herself. She wanted to go into an institution. So we see different strokes for different folks. And I think we need to be mindful not only of culture, but of the preferences of our elders. I'm saying that, of course, in a nuanced way, because even back before the pandemic, when I did the focus groups in Tobago, interestingly enough, in 2014, some of the elders were also expressing the view that they wanted to go into one of the homes because they felt that they were being taken advantage of by relatives and not being cared for properly. So that was an interesting finding to me. Now, back to this table here. In terms of what, let me just minimize this a bit for you. What are the deterrents to institutionalizing chronically ill older persons in Trinidad and Tobago pre-pandemic? That would include the cost of institutional care. We see about 46%. Again, consistent with what Dr. Gomes shared. The quality of institutional care is the main issue, 60%. And the second highest point here variable, fear that institutionalization might lead to early death. I remember my UK supervisors being astounded by this finding. And because the sentiments that were expressed in the actual interviews or focus groups was that, I put them in a home and they were okay and they died within a few days, within a week. Just the apprehension and of being placed in a home, the shame, the embarrassment, the feeling of neglect, it caused some of them to pass away seemingly prematurely. And the other reason why, which is the lesser of the four, the least of the four, is the sense of duty to provide care to older relatives in the family home, but it's still a substantial percentage, which is 44% of participants. And that would be about 189 persons answering this question. Now, I'm sure this doesn't surprise you that during the COVID-19 pandemic, family caregivers were at the highest risk of contracting the virus because they were caring for their elders in close range. They had increased levels of stress, limited social distancing, and they also experienced higher rates of anxiety, depression, and loneliness, disrupted care routines, increased financial strain compared to pre-pandemic times. I mean, I really felt it for some persons. I remember someone very close, a close friend to the family. Her dad would have come to Trinidad for the Christmas season, and unfortunately, because of the lockdown, he could not return to the US, and he passed away. And sadly, the children could not come to the funeral, which it compounded the grief even more. Yes, they were able to participate virtually, but again, it's not the same. You're already dealing with the shock of not being there in the last days of them being here, and then you can't even come to say an in-person farewell. So these are some of the stresses that carers experienced during the pandemic. Technology could only do so much, but we're still grateful because it would have been even worse if she could not have even seen or participated online. Now, what's happening in the post-pandemic world, this new normal? Now, in the context of formal care, what we note, some of the challenges we experienced are staff shortages. We had a lot of medical staff, carers, formal caregivers, sadly being impacted by the virus. There were issues of social isolation that we're still challenged with. The increased cost of living, not only in Trinidad and Tobago, but in other territories. Some of the losses experienced by informal caregivers, including family carers, unpaid carers, limited support, decreased support, caregiver burnout, exhaustion, sickness, and even mortality. Now, the literature on informal care is saturated with data about caregiver burden. And, there's a concern that the person caring may even the person cared for outlives the person that was caring for them because of an imbalance in the care relationship where the carer is not receiving adequate support. Social isolation of seniors, we still have that as an issue post-pandemic, and financial strain. Some of the gains would have included improved infection control protocols in the formal care space, be it at the nursing homes, capital H homes for older persons, telehealth adoption, so we have some of that still going on, especially in the private care sector locally, technology integration, and physical activity increasing, so not too far for me. I could take my mom to physiotherapist. We don't have to do it online. Sometimes you just need to be there to use the equipment and so on. Yeah. Increased appreciation for family carers is one of the gains that is noted in the literature post-pandemic. Now, I hear what Dr. Gomes said is still not enough. We still need more appreciation, not only in word, but in deed, for carers, because there's a great sacrifice that is made. Tech-savvy seniors, we're getting more of that, so Mr. James will be very happy, and he's participating in ensuring that that happens some more. We need to be able to do our elders on TikTok, see them, talk to them via WhatsApp. And I advise you, especially given these stormy conditions that we've experienced, there are free apps that allow you to have walkie-talkies. Just notice open. And so anybody on the channel will hear you, but you can download some free walkie-talkie apps onto your phone so that if you have no Wi-Fi or data, you can use those. Alternative shifting care models where we have that continuum of care, not just locally but internationally, so there's a greater appreciation for that. So in the countries where they leaned more towards institutionalized care, they're seeing ever more the need for strengthening care in the community and in the family space. And safe outdoor visits, we're glad to be able to hug our grandparents once you don't have the flu like me. Please don't go to them if you have the flu like me. Wear your mask, you know, and we're just glad that we can be out and getting some fresh air once the weather is good. And doing the exercise and deep breathing that Dr. Cambridge mentioned. Now, what about the post-pandemic willingness to care? Generally, these are the 4 factors that impact on a person's willingness. Their relationship with the elder. This is the international data. Elder care needs, if it's simple or complex, whether they have the right resources to provide care, including the knowledge to do so, the tools, the equipment, the assistive devices, that sort of thing. And the care models or support systems that are available. So you need also your healthcare professionals supporting it. If you're doing family elder care, you don't want to do that without getting the right team assisting in the extended family, the community members, the neighbor, right? You need the neighbors to help out. All right. Sometimes it's the pie man. So I remember going to Port of Spain and I saw an elder struggling to cross the street. And she could barely walk with a stick that was not suitable for walking. So I went to her, gave my assistance as best I could, and then the pie man, which is where she wanted to go to get her breakfast, said, yes, mother does come on the road all the time, man. Yes, I know mother, and so on and so forth. And yeah, he looking out for mother. All right. So they have their routine that they may want to maintain. I also saw another elder going to the bank, holding on to a building because, again, the stability not so there in the feet, but she insists she's not letting her children do her banking. Right? So she's going for herself. So I'm assisting her because it's like 100 meters from where I saw her to where the bank is. And the taxi man, no mother man, no auntie, say, yeah, she good. She gonna say, auntie, don't tell people you're coming to the bank. No, they go kill me, man. They go kill me, man. Yes, I'm real brave elders out there, but only be safe out there. Please call a friend. We need to build those support networks so we're not taking unnecessary risks with those things. So, right, my poll, everyone, get ready to click that little smiley icon on your screen to raise your hand. So I want to know if you yourself are providing simple or complicated care. Let me see if I could tell you. Yes. Right. So, simple care. The elder you're caring for, the elder relative, they just need some support with their basic needs, who may be paying a bill. But basically they could go around and do things for themselves. Some company, yes, they have relatively stable health. They may have a chronic disease, maybe diabetes or hypertension, but once they take their medication and eat right, they're okay. And they are compliant. They're not what the doctors say non-compliant. No, they're compliant. Limited caregiver burden because you probably have support from other relatives and the caregiver is supportive. I've seen Anissa Hamilton saying simple as is. And they communicate clearly. You don't have any concerns in terms of articulation. They didn't have a stroke that makes that difficult to happen. And you all don't have those historical battles that make talking complicated. So I'm still holding for simple and then I'll go to complicated. Let me see how many hands I have up. Ooh. All right, I'm not seeing hands up yet, so I'm going to go to what is complicated here, which I still 2 other hands raised. So I'm seeing Yvette, simple. Shalene, Dr. Gomes, simple. All right, I know Dr. Gomes said her parents are relatively healthy, so simple. All right, so let me let you guys put your hands down. I had 3 persons out of 67, simple. Complicated, complex, Susan Russell, so maybe 4. All right. So let me let you all put your hands down. Let me give the guys and gals, more gals in the room. But hello to the men who have joined in. We thank you for your presence as well. As Dr. Gomes said, we do have about 33% of our carers are men. And even in my study, there was a 25% participation from male carers. So we thank you for your service as well. So complicated care, complex needs. This is usually the group with maybe some mental cognitive problems. Not that because you have been diagnosed with dementia, you cannot interact or you have no cognitive ability, but we're talking about those on the high end, level 3 or level 4. Those who may have lost limbs or they're bedbound, complex needs. Chronic health conditions, yes. High caregiver burden, so physically, mentally, emotionally, it's very taxing to provide care, and there are communication challenges, both in terms of the ability to speak, ability to hear, and also in terms of the dynamic where it may be very conflicted, as Dr. Cambridge and Dr. Gomes mentioned. So can I see those in the room who have a complex care situation? Can you raise your hands? And if you don't raise your hand, I'm going to assume, and I know it's not good to assume, so please don't make me assume, that you're somewhere in between. So I'm seeing Siobhan has raised her hand, complex. Anybody else is doing complex care, complicated care?
We
Seeing
have
another person?
Mrs. Otley stated complicated in the chat.
All right, great, good. 3 we hear you, we see you, and we acknowledge the care that you're giving. Thank you so much. So we're kind of even. Steven said, seems those who are not voting either holding their vote. Only we don't have a fit amendment in Trinidad and Tobago, I'm just saying. Or they're in between. All right. So thank you. I'll let you all put your hands down. So we appreciate both ends of the spectrum and those in the middle.
Can I just say something, please?
Sure, go ahead.
What happened is when you explained the second one, the complicated care, I had my hand up for the simple. But mommy has dementia, although it's not like very critical in terms of she will remember people and so on, at more long-term memory. So yeah, this is a very interesting topic. I'm sorry I didn't send the link to my brothers and sisters.
Okay.
Very interesting.
We're very happy to serve in this way and to share the experiences and to even hear of your experiences. So thank you for how you're caring for your mom. This session is being recorded, so I know that the organizers, the Coterie, who we again thank you and your team, Dr. Cambridge et al. For setting this program up. They will send communication as to how you can access the recording. So thank you. Right. So remember, folks, it's not a sprint. It's a marathon. So let's prepare ourselves. Let's pace ourselves, and let's be good to ourselves, kind as carers. If you're not well and you need a little break, don't let people guilt you for taking a few minutes to put yourself in order. All right. But back to why we approach care in the way we do locally, and this will answer part of what Dr. Gomes asked as to why women are leaving their jobs in other countries to come home to care. We note the gendered view of care, which is again not unique to Trinidad and Tobago, but then also in terms of how we view care. Most of my participants in terms of the typologies that emerged from the qualitative part of the study, they either fell into the category of providing required care. I give care because I have to. And those were more contested experiences of care. Generally, the carers, you were more likely to hear them give negative responses as to what care was like, caregiving was like. Then there are those who did care out of duty, what I term requited care. I ought to provide care, and usually because there was some element of reciprocity, right? That resulted in them being willing to provide care. Back to the required care where I had to provide care or have to. It's because of the demands of the care, the elders' needs. They had limited options. Who else would do it? Nobody in their view. Societal expectations of doing it because how it will look in terms of the community, peers, other relatives, religious community, and so on. And then socioeconomic constraints, the affordability. Again, touched on by Dr. Gomes. Yes? And now the inspired care. I want to care. And they would have expressed doing care or giving care because of their love for their relative. Come what may. Some people had divine or supernatural experiences and influences that motivated them to provide care no matter what that care demanded. And then that sense of civic mindedness. But what I want to say that was interesting is that the majority of persons in the study saw care as a duty, even those who mentioned caring out of love. So I got the sense that in Trinidad and Tobago, more often than not, love is expressed by doing. So even if I don't say the word love because I may not be comfortable using that mushy word with this interviewer or this strange woman who come and ask me my business, so I give informed consent. They give informed consent, I just want to say that. But we are less likely to say love, we are more likely to express love by doing works of care. All right. So these carers who were inspired to care were more likely to express a greater appreciation and positive experience. That's how they described it, no matter how intense the caregiving was. But those who gave requited care, who did it out of duty, it was like just mix. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, but there was no real bad or real good. Okay? And then there was a sense of ambivalence as to the care experience. Generally, that's something that was across the board among participants, which shows you a real, we mustn't romanticize care. It's a real thing. It has its highs, it has its lows, it has its challenges. Even when we do care and we're passionate and we see the positive outcomes from it. Now, there was a study done in 2012 by Erlingson et al. And that their findings are consistent with what I found in Trinidad and Tobago. And they caution that, listen, if we want to get balance and ensure wellness when we're providing care, we must see caregiving in the context of reciprocity. That yes, there is meaning in our provision of care, and we must be willing to share care with others. So those women who are given that caring role, or they feel compelled to do so, there's nothing wrong in caring, but you should be able to negotiate getting support from others, rather than those who are the other end of this diagram saying, well, I'm irreplaceable, my relative is ill, I shouldn't burden my children, I shouldn't burden my whoever else in the family to help to articulate, I need support, I need a break, I need a timeout, or else you may end up like one of these care bears, you might end up like Grumpy Bear, right, where you're so burnt out, you experience compassion fatigue, because again, you were intensely, with good intentions, giving care. And it may be, this is not just be on you, maybe your situation, that those expectations that were placed on you and that you accepted, you didn't get to negotiate the transaction as to how this care would be shared with those other persons who may not care as good as you, but they could care enough that you could get a little weekend off, right? And sadly, many people experience burnout, so much caregiver burden stress, they may become very ill and not be able to continue with the same intensity of providing care. And then there's a whole issue of change, managing change. Those who weren't so accustomed to the care, and now you tell me I had to share care. I have my life going on, who are you? And all of a sudden you're the bad person. You're the wicked stepmother, wicked child. And it was like, did you not look at my care experience across the life course? And I've heard my participants complain about this. The relatives come down from the States and they tell them they're doing such a terrible job. And look, mommy complaining about how I don't feed her. Because mommy has dementia. Right? And she's always complaining but she forgot that she eat. And she forgot that, it's only those who are really familiar with what was going on could say, no, this person has been giving care consistently at a high degree. So we have to be careful not to pass premature judgment on caregivers. When I worked in the division of aging, I always told my officers, pause before you go to judge prematurely. A lot of times, persons calling and saying, this one are doing this and this one is a perpetrator. If you listen to the stories and investigate around them more fully, a lot of times the person who making most of the complaints was in fact the perpetrator. So you have to listen objectively and really look at as much evidence as possible. But back to my point in this diagram, don't reach to the place of Goldilocks after you sample all these different care options and then you're so burnt out, fed up, sick, you just don't care anymore. We need to find a way to get balance and hopefully stay at this side of things where we love a lot beer. Yeah? Or somewhere at a healthy middle. Now, back to pre-pandemic caregiver needs. As you would sense in the room here tonight, there's a call for more information and advice about the type of help and support that is available. So we put in the chat some of the services that people may not even be aware of that we have locally. It may have limited reach, but at least there's something that you could reach for, like Eldamo, like free counseling. Yes, and you can even call 800 OPIC, which is the Older Persons Information Center in the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services, to get more up-to-date information on national services. Yes, that's 800 toll-free 6742. I'll put a plug in there. Now, interestingly, my participants didn't want money pre-pandemic, 7%. They were like, only 7% wanted a little more money to provide care. Maybe it was the group that I had, all right, because this was a sample of convenience at the time. But we need to be mindful that there are more developed countries. We know right now things are funny when it comes to the money, but there are countries that provide payment to caregivers, such as Australia, the United Kingdom, Germany, Canada, and Norway. And when it comes to care leave, I really hope someone from personnel department in the public service had a little stint there, and they told me that they're considering doing a care leave policy, because many of us who work, we use our vacation. There were many vacations I used all of it, just providing care at a hospital or so on. And so then when it's time for me to rest, it's like, where's my leave? Sick leave being used to, care for somebody who's unwell in the family. So a carer's leave is important. We don't just need maternity leave for those of us who are parents and have children or about to have a child. We need care leave. And so in addition to Australia, the United Kingdom, and Germany, we have France and Sweden. They provide leave, not necessarily only for elders, but for persons to care for an unwell relative. Let's have that, please. I advocate for that. So who should pay for the support services for family caregivers? According to my study, it was not. Listen, people that say we only want the government to do everything, but this was not the case. Yes, the government, but also the family. So there was a mixed group. It was almost even, Steven. But more persons would have said the percentage would have been the family pays for care support to relatives. I know of a family that was interviewed where the relatives paid one of the children, one of the daughters, left formal work to care for the parent. And so those siblings who were employed, male and female, paid her to provide care because they were in good jobs, and also paid once a year for her to have a vacation. These are some things we can consider. Now, as I wrap up, I want to just highlight some other post-pandemic family caregiver support that is provided internationally, and also to some extent it would have been provided in other territories before the pandemic. So respite and support services, some of us need a spa day. We can't afford it ourselves, but it would be nice to have that. I know when we have International Women's Day, for instance, sometimes the Ministry of Health would organize for persons to be able to get a chit, in addition to doing your tests, get a manicure, your pedicure, your facials, your massage. Yes, it's good to participate in those things, and it's good quality stuff as well. And then there are some of the NGOs, some of the churches that bring down persons. They're not focusing necessarily on caregivers alone, but they provide free support services like that, package of health tests and that sort of thing. But yes, we need to rest. We need support groups. We know there are some going on that some private citizens have organized, mainly online. Financial workplace support, I mentioned some of that already, in terms of flexible work as well. It would be nice to have some tax breaks so that we can get resources for caregivers in addition to our elders. Mental and physical support, Dr. Cambridge spoke about that, and there's a number 800-1-MSD. That's 800-1-MSD for free counseling through National Family Services Division, Ministry of Social Development. And the tech support, Mr. James touched on that, so I won't go into that too much. I'll just sign up with NALIS, call your nearest NALIS and find out what they can offer. And then additional considerations, and I know throughout this webinar series, Coterie of Social Workers would have had someone address the issue of legal and advocacy support. Then there's, and in terms of even like financial issues, having a will and that sort of thing. And you can also go onto the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services Facebook page for webinars that were done during the pandemic, 2021 and 2022. For World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, that would be around June and July. The videos are still up and you would get information on these topics. And there are also copies of presentations on the ministry's website. So yes, as for what we can control issues pertaining to ourselves. We may not be able to change our whole state system, but we can do our best to be balanced and put that mask on, as Dr. Cambridge encouraged us. Let's do the self-care that she mentioned, the spiritual self-care, physical, emotional, intellectual, mental, social, and sensory. And in closing, I just want to say you have approval to set boundaries, connect with nature, get enough rest, cultivate creativity, stay active, connect with others, practice self-reflection, and find your purpose. So to all the caregivers in the room, thank you. You may not wear a cape, but you are a superhero to your loved one. Thank you for being their rock and their champion. And that will be the end of it, of my presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Blake, for that impactful and excellent presentation on the willingness to care. At this time, I would like to welcome Ms. Annette Batiste.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for a very successful session. Our theme this evening was elderly and the new normal. We had 4 presenters. Our presenters was very dynamic, articulate, and comprehensive. I say a special thanks to you all for taking the time to come and give us such knowledge, which is very valuable to us. To our chairperson, I said thank you, and to our technical support, thank you very much. I said thank you to Dr. Cambridge, one of our very own, who was one of the presenters, and to her committee. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Dr. Cambridge, for the insight of having these webinars. We are ever grateful to you for this, for we have learned quite a lot. I will ask that all who attended these webinars should share and don't be selfish with it. I thank all the attendees for taking part in these webinars. Without you all, it could not be a success. I further thank Andrea, our administrator assistant, very much for the help that she gave to us in order for us to pull this off. I say thank you all. Well done. Can we now close with a prayer? Heavenly Father, we thank Thee for all that was said, all the information that we gather. We thank You for those who were able to give us these great, informative, and educational information that will be beneficial to us. I pray, God, that we all will embrace these knowledge, and will put it to add it to our daily life for our well-being. Heavenly Father, we thank You. Amen.
Aging Empowerment Series, navigating the journey to vitality, purpose, and well-being.